everybody, and welcome to another session of Stay Connected with the Worcester Senior Center. I'm your host today, Dr. Michael Hirsch, the Medical Director for the Division of Public Health in the City of Worcester. And today we're doing our June edition. And June is such an amazing month. So many milestones and great events happen for most families in June. So there's a lot to talk about, and I'll also talk a little bit about some of the public health issues that we're having. First off, June is named after the Greek goddess Juno. Juno was the goddess of pregnancy and marriages. So the fact that people crave June weddings probably stems back into the ancient Roman times because it was considered the best weather month to get married in. As you know, in the middle of June, somewhere around the 20th, 21st of June, is the summer solstice where spring gives up and summer takes over. Most people think of summer really starting on the Memorial Day holiday, but June is really the transition month, and the days get longer and longer and longer until that summer solstice, and then they start getting gradually shorter and shorter until we get into the fall. But we have some really good weather coming up, and I think that it's going to be a really great summer. As you probably know, the City of Worcester is making every effort to get lifeguards to staff all of our public pool spaces and spray parks, and they're hard to come by. Lifeguards are very hard to come by these days, but I think we've done a good job, and the plan is to keep these facilities open from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. every day. And it's a great opportunity for your kids to get, out there in the sunshine, but in the pool to cool off if it gets to be a heat wave. And also there's the Rec Worcester program, which continues to grow every year. It's more and more sophisticated. And that's a program where your child, if they're old enough and you feel comfortable with the notion that they can go there themselves, they get a bus pass and they can go to any one of 13 sites where there are different kinds of camp activities. Some are athletics, some are arts and crafts. And this is all on our city website, www.worcesterma.gov. So don't deny yourself the possible pleasure of seeing your kids interact with a different neighborhood, maybe a different set of friends. Some of the ties that you make in these Rec Worcester situations, we've heard from teachers and from parents, have lasted many, many years after the first Rec Worcester together. So June, as I mentioned, is a big month because there are these weddings that happen. And maybe you have some coming up in your family, and I wish you all the best for that. Weddings are just wonderful. And then, of course, there's graduations. And many of the high schools, middle schools, and elementary schools are going to have ceremonies this month, and they should be beautiful. And there's some very interesting speakers coming to some of the local colleges. I think that it's a joyous time where you really celebrate the kind of milestones that your children have achieved. And for those of you that are seniors and you're seeing your grandchildren go through these milestones, it's really like a shot of oxygen. You just you can't help but feel super proud and super happy for your grandchildren as they move on to the next phase of their education or their work lives, depending on what level of education they're completing. One thing that we've been very happy about at UMass Medical School is that we've been very involved with a program called the Worcester Pipeline, which has some of our medical students, some of our graduate students that are studying for PhDs, some of our nursing students tutoring and mentoring South High and North High and Worcester Tech students in career choices, and trying to perhaps interest them in pre-medical studies, and giving them a leg up on some of the applications that they have to go through for college. And it's been a very, very successful program. Mr. Robert Lane of UMass deserves amazing credit. He's been doing it for, I think, at least 30 years. And it's been one of the more successful collaborations that we've had with the school system at the medical school. So what else do we have to know about June? Well, June has, as a month, it has a special jewel, the pearl. That's the stone for the month of June. And the flower is the rose. So these are two very, very popular items. And you can imagine how the roses got chosen, because they are just about to pop in gardens all over the city. There are a lot of really good rose gardeners in this city. And you'll see them. They're all different kind of colors, and always the common denominator is they smell great. They do have thorns, which you have to be careful about, but they're one of my favorite flowers. June is also recognized as a National Pride Month. So this is seems like a drop in the bucket, saying it's happened like for the last 30 years. It's a big deal, because nobody really was celebrating the LGBTQ plus community before these pride events started in the 90s. And now this is like a regular occurrence with pride parades and different events to celebrate the notion that two people in love are the most important thing, and it doesn't matter what your sex is and what your race is, what your other ethnicities are. You just have to have love between two people, and that's really worth celebrating. So we do a very good job here in Worcester celebrating the LGBTQ plus community. And could more be done nationally? Absolutely. I think there's a lot of concern about the politics of this election year, that some of the rights that have been so hard fought to be won by the LGBTQ plus community might be peeled back, because we have a very conservative Supreme Court and a very conservative Republican Party to contend with. Not getting political about it, I just hope that we continue to celebrate the notion that anybody that loves one another is worthy of support, and clearly that community has made huge contributions to Worcester, and in business, in arts, in government. We're very fortunate to have that vibrant pride community here in Worcester. What else is June known for? Well, I'm wearing a hat, as you may know, and I wear lots of hats. This one celebrates the annual Wear Orange weekend, which is the actual first weekend in June. It's this year it's going to be June 1st, 2nd, and 3rd. And it's been adopted by the Moms Demand Action group within the Bloomberg Gun Violence Prevention Group. Orange is the color that hunters wear when they're out in the forest, in the hope that they're so brightly adorned with orange that they won't accidentally get shot. And so that color has taken new meaning, because there are so many gun violence episodes around the country. It means don't shoot me. And There are going to be a number of events here in Worcester and in Massachusetts in general that will be commemorating those that we lost to gun violence. Gun violence here in Worcester has definitely increased over the last 2-3 years, beginning kind of at the last vestiges of the pandemic and now moving into 2024. Despite the fact we've had more shootings, we have not had that high an increase in deathly shootings. And that's more of a tribute to a number of factors. We use the technology that the police have really embraced called ShotSpotter. That's something that is listening all the time to the audio imprint of a gunshot wound. And when they hear one of these audio imprints in the headquarters, they dispatch a team to that site. And because of that, we actually get to gunshot wound victims faster. And when our trauma team at UMass gets a chance to get at a gunshot wound victim in that first half hour after the gunshot, we have a much better chance than ever to get rid of the death part of the gunshot. So, yes, our gun violence victim numbers are up, but our gun fatality numbers are still low. And they're the lowest of any of the largest 10 cities in the Commonwealth. So it's a very complicated issue. 90% of the gun homicides in our area and also in the whole Commonwealth of Massachusetts are unfortunately young black men shooting young black men. And this has a lot to do with the drug trade, with the gang territories, and it also has to do with the fact that, well-meaning as they were, a lot of legislation has been passed that mandates that somebody over 18 who brandishes a gun in a crime has to do extra time for having the gun. But when a younger person than 18 brandishes a gun, they still are tried as juveniles, and so they get out of jail or juvie sooner, and that's a better thing for the unfortunate folk that do the drug pushing. So now it's our teens and even preteens that are running around the city delivering drugs, and they're all packing heat, as they say. They have less restraint about shooting other people because they don't understand the consequences as well. They think life is a video game, and it's not a video game. You don't get another life after you've been shot. But unfortunately, that gunplay is much more frequent in that youthful group than in the older folk. So that was an unintended consequence of mandatory sentencing when you are an adult carrying a firearm. The other piece of the gun violence puzzle is suicide. Firearm suicide is also on the rise. And when you pick a firearm to be the vehicle by which you try to kill yourself, you are 93% successful. If you choose something else, pills, trying to inhale carbon monoxide from your car exhaust, jumping off of a building, the success rate, such that it is, it's a bad word to call this, of completed suicides is much lower. It's something in the range of 30%. 93% if you use a gun, 33% if you use something else. And because of the availability of weapons, the gun violence, both on the suicide side and the homicide side, are rising. Last year, in 2023, nationwide, 48,000 people were killed in the United States from gun violence. Now, that's actually almost as many that were killed in the Vietnam War. It's more than the number of Americans that were killed in the Korean War. That's insane. So I continue to work with the police department and some of our local clergy and the Moms Demand Action Group to see what we can do about trying to put a lid on some of this violence. I'm still supervising over our annual gun buyback. This will be our 23rd year of doing one. And in that time, we've collected almost 4,600 weapons. It's been a very well-received program. And I think as far as the newest aspects of it, it's fascinating. We are taking the guns and melting them down and using blacksmiths and vocational high school students, such as the ones at Assabet High School. We're fashioning garden tools out of the guns. So it's kind of a cycle like in the Isaiah proverb that they shall make their swords into plowshares. That's kind of what we're doing. But it's not enough. It's not enough. Too many people in Worcester know that their young men are leaving their home on a Friday night or Saturday night packing a gun. And the conversations that I would have or that the police would have with that young man are not going to have the impact that the families themselves would have if they would just say, hey, what's in that fanny pack? Or why is there a big bulge underneath your shirt? I know it's a tough conversation to have. I can only imagine how alienating that might be with your young one. But when you see some of these young people, and in the news the last 3-4 months, we've had an 11-year-old girl killed in a crossfire. She had nothing to do with the gang life. We've had a 16-year-old killed, a 15-year-old killed. That's such a tragedy. It means that for whatever life they would have normally lived, we've missed out on their development, on the contributions they could have made to society, on the families they might have raised. All of these questions are left up in the air. We should not be feeling like we're in a combat zone walking through the streets of our cities in America. So that brings me to another June thing, and this year is particularly significant. June the 6th is D-Day, the anniversary of the Allied forces landing on the Normandy beaches to attack the Atlantic Wall, which Hitler had built as an impenetrable fortress that couldn't be breached. But we breached it using our allies from Canada and Britain and France. Free French fighters also fought there. And it was an amazing undertaking. 5,000 ships, over 200,000 men. If you haven't seen any of the famous movies portraying this, Saving Private Ryan from 1998 or The Longest Day from 1962, do yourself a favor and potentially sit down with your grandchildren, if they're old enough to watch some violence, to understand the enormity of this event and how it could have gone wrong at any one of 1,000 points. But I think just by sheer will and skill and excellent planning, the Allies persevered. And really, if you think about it, the war was over in 11 months. That's a pretty incredible record for that invasion. That invasion has a great deal of meaning to me because sitting in a concentration camp in Holland where my parents and my dad had a farm detail where he and a group of other prisoners harvested vegetables for the farm. It wasn't the most healthy or incredibly lovely group of vegetables. It was mostly parsnips and carrots, from which the cook for the camp would make these huge tureens of soup that were more like water than anything else. But because my dad was in the field a lot, and there was so much hunger in Holland because the Nazi troops had taken all the food away from the Dutch people, even the ones that weren't in the camp, regular Dutch people, that people were starving. So he could trade a little bit of extra food to the local resistance fighters and farmers in exchange for stuff. So his prize exchange was he got one of the farmers to give him a little radio that was a shortwave radio, so he could actually pick up the broadcasts from London by the famous London station called the BBC. You've probably seen it on TV. There's a BBC for America channel on a lot of cable outlets. And they knew from the resistance folk that there were going to be signals coming out on these daily broadcasts that they were listening to. They were listening to them surreptitiously, like underneath a bunch of blankets in the lights out phase of their curfew, at a very, very low volume, just trying to hear what was going on. And that's how they found out that there were, progress was being made in Italy and progress was being made in the Pacific. But they all knew that invasion was going to come, but nobody knew exactly where. But they were told when they heard the symbol of Beethoven's Fifth Symphony, which you might know, it goes da 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 da. In Morse code, which you use for a telegraph, that da 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 is the V in the alphabet, and V was the symbol for victory. When that jingle would come on the radio, it meant that the invasion was going to happen within a week. And sure enough, my dad heard it one night, end of May of 1944, 80 years ago, 80 years this year. And he knew that the invasion was going to happen and that it was only a matter of time until the camp would be liberated. And it was a longer time. It was the worst time, he said, because they knew sooner or later they would be liberated, but it took a long time. The Allies, after successfully invading Normandy, tried to liberate Holland in September of 44, but it was a disaster, and it's been made into a movie and a book called A Bridge Too Far. The planning for the liberation of Holland was very poor, and it ended up with 30,000 Allied troops being taken prisoner. So that was unfortunate because it took another 8 months until my dad and mom were liberated on April 12th, 1945. But it all started on June, and interestingly, the Canadian Army was the group that liberated my parents, and they landed on Juno Beach in the 5 beaches that were used in the Normandy invasion. Juno was being handled by the Canadians. So another good June reference there, right? The other thing I would mention about the month of June is Father's Day. Father's Day this year falls on the 15th, and it's a darn important day. I think fathers, I'm biased here, I think fathers are very, very important in family life, and certainly if you're a successful father, meaning that your children grow up and get through school and pick a career and then start families of their own, there's no better feeling in the world. I became a grandfather this past year. I have 2 beautiful granddaughters, and my son and my daughter are unbelievable parents. Now, I would ascribe most of that to my wonderful wife of almost 45 years now, because I was very, very busy in the OR all those years, and she had to do a lot of the upbringing stuff with the kids, and she did a wonderful job, and just seeing how great they are as parents, I'm a very lucky person. But if you do get to celebrate Father's Day, please know how much I respect fathers everywhere. Of course, I respect mothers too, but I think fathers deserve a little bit of love for keeping families together. Frequently nowadays, there are fathers who are stay-at-home fathers while their wives are the ones with the busy careers. They're being the caretakers at home. So anything goes now in the family structure, and it's a great tribute to the resiliency of the family. It doesn't matter who's making the dollars for the family or who is considered the head of the household. And going back to Pride Month, the LGBTQ community has been shown time and time again to be excellent parents. And some of them are going through the process of actually having the babies biologically. Some are just adopting children, but it's a great thing for children to see that the nuclear family doesn't necessarily involve a man and a woman, and then children can be any combination. So happy Father's Day for those of you who celebrate. As far as the rest of the month goes, you already mentioned the summer solstice, which will be somewhere around June 21st. And then we usually transition over to summertime, and soon it'll be 4th of July weekend, and it flies by. So before I sign off, I know we talked a lot about things in June. I wanted to give you some updates about the public health situation. First, I want to go back to the common things happen commonly. We are thinking that it's going to be a bad mosquito summer. We also think it's going to be a hot summer. So sunscreen is very important. The sunscreen level should be at least 30. And you should really try to get the kind that doesn't wash off every time you go into the pool or into the lake, so that you don't have to keep reapplying it. You also have to be careful just in general that it's not just on the very sunny days that you can get sunburn. You can get it on a hazy day, and there are important things you have to do if you're outdoors all that time, and that's keep hydrated. So that's why I'm always with a bottle of water these days. Hydration is very important, and we've had a number of little kids in this heat wave times coming in, and elderly people too, dehydrated and in need of IV fluids to resuscitate them. So a little bit of these, just plain water is fine, but of course there are fancier resuscitation fluids out there. There's Gatorade type of stuff with electrolytes in it. I don't think you have to be that fancy so long as you make sure you're getting enough water. Then the mosquito piece, we've talked about this many times together, the 5 Ds, right? Dawn and dusk are the 2 times that the mosquitoes love to be out and biting you. So if you can avoid being out during those times, that's great. If you can't, then you have to go to the D that's about dress. That means long sleeves and long pants if possible. Then the fourth D is DEET. DEET is the ingredient in mosquito repellents, and they're safe. They're not carcinogenic. They're not DDT, which is the kind of pesticide that was used back in the 60s and 70s that proved to cause cancer. DEET's very safe. And then the 5th D is something that maybe you haven't thought about, and that is the larvae of the mosquitoes love to live in stagnant water. So if you have an old rain barrel or a bird bath that you haven't really emptied in a while, that's where they like to grow. Old tires are a favorite spot for larvae. So we work very intensely with the Central Massachusetts Mosquito Control Commission, which is chartered essentially by the Mass Department of Public Health. They have traps all over the city that are testing whatever mosquitoes they catch to see if they have West Nile virus or EEE, Eastern Equine Encephalopathic virus. And if they do, those are areas that we preferentially will spray. A lot of the spraying is done from overhead planes. Some is done from trucks. We always have information about where the spraying will happen on the government website. And the recommendation is on the day that the spraying is happening, keep your windows closed during that time, keep your pets and children indoors, and make sure that they're indoors for the good hour or so after the spraying is done. Other than that, as far as public health things that are going on, we are seeing an uptick in COVID, a set of variants, the KP.1 variant, which are also being called FLIRT, F-L-I-R-T variant, seem to be the prevalent one right now. It's an Omicron derivative one, a variant that came from Omicron. It seems that if you're up to date with your vaccinations, and if you have been following this along, there was a vaccination that was recommended for last fall, and then a booster was recommended for this spring. Not that many people have taken advantage of that, but if you did, your likelihood of getting sick from these new variants is very low. That being said, if you do get symptoms that seem like a cold, seem like allergies, don't assume that that's what it is. You should get a test and make sure you don't have COVID. If you do have COVID and you're a high-risk patient, meaning somebody that's obese, has diabetes, has cardiac disease, respiratory disease, immune diseases like lupus or rheumatoid arthritis or HIV, all of those risk factors make it a recommendation that you, after you get tested positive for COVID, you should take the medication called Paxlovid. That involves 3 days of taking 5 pills, and it will not prevent you from getting it, but if you get symptoms of COVID, they should be milder. And we're not really going to go back to any kind of mitigations like we used to do. I think the country is moved on. They're not going to do social distancing. They're not going to do mask wearing. But the current recommendation for patients that do have COVID is that they stay out of the public for 5 days, or at least for at least 24 hours after they have stopped their symptoms. Then they can go out in public with a mask for another 5 days. They don't have to test again if they're asymptomatic at the end of that 9 to 10 day period. They just can go on and do their thing. So the one thing I would continue to ask people to do is hand washing. I really feel that hand washing is something that shouldn't be dependent only on COVID being around. It's just a good idea. You don't realize how many times in a day you touch your face, you sneeze, you cough, and your hands are around this. Wash your hands. And the hand sanitizers are fine, but a couple of times a day you should really wash your hands in warm water, and that may stop some spread within your circle of friends and family. There has been talk about an outbreak of measles in several communities around the country. They're mostly in areas where the anti-vax community has taken root. So with all the stuff that happened with COVID, one of the consequences was that people that were against vaccination are I think, more numerous than before. And in areas where vaccination numbers have come down, measles has made a comeback. It's a very, very serious disease. 1 out of 5 people that get measles will end up hospitalized. And 1 out of 3 may end up with brain involvement. It was a terrible disease before the vaccinations for it came into play, and we almost had wiped it out, but now we're seeing this kind of comeback going on. This year, it seems like monkeypox has not been a problem. And I think a lot of that, again, here we're talking about Pride Month. I'm very proud that the LGBTQ plus community embraced the idea of better hygiene and safer sexual practices to try to cut down on the spread of monkeypox. There is a vaccine for it now. If you do happen to have an outbreak in your circle of friends, AIDS Project Worcester will be able to guide you if you call them to get information about how to get this vaccine. We don't really have any solid information about what is happening with the bird flu, which is called H5N1. 2 dairy farm workers in the United States so far have contracted this. And how are the cows getting it? From the birds? Well, the cows have been being fed products that are made out of birds. And unfortunately, when they get infected, the cows don't really look that sick, but in their unpasteurized milk, they may have bird flu in it. So that's why the current recommendation is not to drink raw milk or raw cheese or any of these unprocessed milk products, because there is a risk that you might get this avian flu. this has long been a worry of the CDC that a flu from an animal species would jump to humans, and many people have hypothesized that that's what happened in the wet markets in Wuhan province that started the COVID outbreak back in 2020, that it was one of these little armadillo-type creatures that carried this virus and it jumped to humans. So I think that so far we haven't found avian flu to be a threat, but it's one of those ones where you have to just kind of keep listening, stay tuned. We're hoping that the media calms down a little bit. I mean, every time there's an outbreak of anything right now, the media is all over it, and it sounds again like the sky is falling. And we in the public health world have lost enough credibility that we can't really afford to have everybody running around like their hair is on fire. It's got to be a real serious threat in order for us to, calm the waters and not create hysteria. So I don't really feel like any of the things that we've talked about for health problems are anything to worry about if you do some common sense stuff. So that's really all the public health stuff I would talk about in the month of June. I think that, again, if you have one of those life change events in your month where one of your loved ones is engaged and getting married, one of your loved ones is graduating from whatever level of school that they're in, I wish you all the best. And stop and smell the roses, which is the June flower, because these are events that should be celebrated, should be commemorated. They're remembered incredibly much by the young people going through them, and it's one of those beautiful family events that makes a family stronger. So I'm going to quit there and just wish you all well for this month. And I'll be back talking about July sometime in about a month. So thanks very much, and take good care.